Joseph Sohm wasn't born with a camera in his hand, but it was pretty close. He says his earliest memories are of taking pictures. He walked around snapping imaginary photos until his father bought him a real camera for his 5th birthday. Since then, Sohm has taken thousands of photos, many gracing the pages of Newsweek, the New York Times, and National Geographic. In his book, Visions of America, Photographing Democracy, Sohm travels across the country, photographing everything from landmarks to portraits to little-known small towns, all in an effort to answer one question: how do you photograph democracy? And Joseph Sohm is here with that answer. Is there an answer to that?
Well, that's one of the things I've learned, is that there is not a single simple answer, and it can't be taken in a single picture. However, in my youth, I was under the delusion, I guess you would say, that it could be taken with a single picture, that if I traveled far enough and stayed in enough Motel 6s, that I could actually get that single picture that would define democracy.
I'll tell you something that's a little eerie, because I was thinking of, Childe Hassam, the American artist.
Yes.
And the parade, the very first photo in your, I said if I was going to pick one, and then I opened your book, and there it was. I said, oh my gosh, that's kind of what he did. The ticker tape parade with the flag hanging. That to me would be the photograph.
To be honest, I was aware of that painting when I took that picture, and it was for the ticker tape parade down Broadway for the Gulf War. And the interesting thing about photography is it's, you're initially, if it's event-driven like that, you're very goal-oriented, but it's the little surprises along the way, and that picture was a surprise. And my photo agents, who virtually don't like anything, said that picture they thought was the single best picture of an American flag.
There you go.
And so I didn't argue with it.
All right. So let's go through some of these. So we're going to start with some landscapes. So you photograph iconic landscapes, Grand Canyon, other things. I mean, very American. Go ahead. You can just talk about them.
Well, when I photograph landscapes, to be honest, that's when I change my paintbrush. And in this case, my paintbrush is a panoramic camera.
They're fantastic.
And the pans that I take are in what we refer to as an aspect ratio, the width to the height of a 3:1. And the interesting thing about photographing, and I think Ken Burns made this point in shooting the national parks, but if you were to do the same thing in Europe, you wouldn't be able to do it, because you couldn't take a 3:1 ratio, shooting pans, go to Europe, and isolate images that have no evidence of humankind. And that's what I'm trying to do with landscapes, is to capture the natural beauty, and that's why I also change formats to go to pans, because in this case, bigger is better.
All right, Washington, D.C., that's another theme.
Washington, D.C. and icons. I'm kind of a punster a bit, and I call them mayor icons. And, the thing about icons that struck me as a former American history teacher is that we take all these things for granted now, whether it's Mount Rushmore or Washington Monument. But the reality is, 200 years ago, we had no symbols for democracy. So I thought, back to that question, if you want to photograph democracy, one of the best places to start is the symbols of democracy, i.e. the Statue of Liberty and all the things we go, oh, that's a cliche. Well, the reason things are cliches is because they symbolize a bigger concept, and that's what I think icons do, and that's why I had to focus in Washington, D.C.
You have a great story about photographing Mount Rushmore.
Mount Rushmore, is not an easy place to get to, and it's a long drive. And I would fly into Denver, and I learned that then, 20 years ago when I took, or 15 years ago when I took that picture, that weathermen always didn't know what the weather really was. So I would go there and drive for 24 hours and finally get there, and then it would be in a complete fog after they told me it'd be complete sunlight, so I'd have to go back. Second time I go back, I was serious. So I got there at 5 a.m. The sunrise was about 7. I set up my cameras. There wasn't a single tourist there. I get everything perfect. The sunlight starts to hit George Washington, but there are 4 founders there, or from Teddy Roosevelt, Jefferson, George Washington, and Lincoln, of course. But the sun wouldn't hit them all, so you need them all. So I had to sit and wait, and the longer I waited, finally I had the perfect shot. And right as I'm about to shoot the perfect shot, suddenly I see an orange dot walking around on the top of Lincoln's head. And I go, what is that? Because I'm looking through my lens and things, and I'm going, it's like he's got something on his face or something, And as it turns out, it was a human being with a camera walking on top, messing up my entire photograph.
I like it. I think it worked well.
Well, ultimately, I kind of channeled my inner New Yorker and asked him to get off Lincoln's head. And the National Park ranger said, "Excuse me, sir, that's not going to happen anytime soon." And I say, "Well, how come?" He said, "He's the superintendent of the national parks." I said, "Okay, I'll wait."
Well, of course, you can't be photographing democracy without photographing presidents. You've also done that.
I've tried to do as many, quote, Republicans as I have Democrats, depending upon which flavor is in for which season. But I began with Jimmy Carter all the way to, some
of these are would-be presidents.
Well, no, some of them are. The last photograph in the book, Visions of America, is Barack Obama. And so once I got that shot, I thought this is a historical shot. I didn't know he was going to win then, and that's when we published.
I was just saying to you, this is a very happy book, and people are going to want to have this on their coffee table, Visions of America. Joseph Sohm, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, really beautiful. All right, that is it for Greater Boston. A reminder to tune into my radio show tomorrow at noon on 89.7 WGBH. Then tomorrow night on Greater Boston, Jared Bowen ends this theater's season by going center stage with 2 new musicals. That is tomorrow at 7. I'm Emily Rooney. Good night.